Joined us. Good morning. I would like to call the Wednesday, June 16th DAC meeting to order. We will begin with roll call. Haley Dellery, present. Joseph Cologne,
Present.
Danny McElmurray, present. Eleanor Burke, present. Miguel Viteri,
Present.
present. Lewis Haywood, absent. And Lindsay Glatz, present.
Present.
The public comment form link is available at nola.gov/CPC. It will be available until the end of the 5-minute recess, after which public comments will be read into the record as part of the consideration of dockets. At this time, would the committee like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the May 19th meeting?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
We have a motion by Parks and Parkways. Do we have a second?
A second.
And a second by Capital Projects. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And the motion passes. The second item on today's agenda is zoning docket 5721 for a property located at 4068 Tulane Avenue. The site is currently a fast food restaurant, Burger King. Well, it was formerly Burger King, and they will demolish the structure and construct a new Chick-fil-A fast food restaurant. It requires a conditional use for the drive-through, and it's also in a use restriction overlay, which requires a conditional use for fast food restaurants. Additionally, it's in an EC Enhancement Corridor Design Overlay District. Stephen has met already previously with the applicant, and they intend, as part of their conditional use request, to request variances for several of the CZO requirements. Eleanor already mentioned the setback. It's in the MU2 high intensity mixed use district, and the yard requirements are listed as none. So technically it would be compliant with that. However, it's along Tulane Avenue, which is meant for a higher density, more pedestrian oriented development. And so its setbacks don't quite meet the design, the building design requirements that the primary entry should be oriented to the street. Other variances that they would be seeking is to provide more than the required amount of parking. And just some other building design standards are that it should not have a blank canvas facing the primary street. It has some building articulation, but it could be improved. And also it should have a 50% transparency, which it doesn't seem to have. Let me see if I have any other notes. The last two things that I'd like to mention are that it does not appear to meet the 12-foot ceiling height requirement. It appears that they're 10 feet. And pedestrian walkways to the site are missing. And also, as part of the EC Enhancement Corridor, we would want it to support transit at that primary corner. This has not been assigned to a planner yet, but it would be going to the next city planning meeting.
When you say it's going to the next city planning meeting, what is it going to the next city planning meeting for?
What date would that be?
Well, I mean, what is it? Is it going for approval for the conditional use approval? Is that what the deal is?
It has not, we have not done a staff report yet for it, so we don't have a recommendation for approval. But it would be for a conditional use to allow the drive-through and to allow a fast food restaurant in the use restriction overlay. And also the variances, any variances that would be required.
So you're reviewing this with the lens that should they receive the conditional use and all the variances, how shall this design look? Not to comment on, where it should be really, or whether or not it should have a drive-through.
I think we can make those comments. We could say the setbacks should be decreased, the drive-through should be changed. You can make any comments you want.
Okay.
So at this time, would the committee like to have a discussion? Oh, I'm sorry. At this time, the applicant now has 10 minutes to present.
Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Avery Ford with Sherman Strategies locally. Sorry about the delay in joining. I think I had a wrong link that I had sent to our team, but I'm joined today by Patrick Davis with Restaurant Development and Chick-fil-A, and Laura Nuno who's with Innovation and Design with Chick-fil-A, and then also Todd Rogers with Graydon Engineering. So between that whole team, we're happy to, I guess, get into specifics on any of the items that you named, Haley. As you mentioned, it's a conditional use request for both drive-through and fast food at the location. The site, of course, does have a history of both of those things. And the original plan was to look at retrofitting the existing building that is there that was historically a Burger King and is now another kind of fast food chicken concept. But it became clear that we could get a more efficient design through a demolition and relocating the building a little further back, and then just allowing really more cars to circulate. Given the high volume that Chick-fil-A typically experiences, that was kind of one of the foremost comments from neighbors, the council member, and really a few folks that looked at this site very preliminarily. So that was our starting point. I think you do have our latest site plan in the package. And again, we're just happy to answer questions between all of our team members on here. Thank you for reviewing.
Good morning. Thank you, Avery. And I'll just chime in and just first let me introduce myself. So I'm Patrick Davis with the Chick-fil-A Development, and just excited to present our project to the group and answer any questions you may have. We're excited to be a part of possibly becoming a part of the community there and servicing the community. So again, look forward to just walking through this project and answering any questions you may have.
Do we want to start with the site plan?
Yeah, I think if the applicant could walk us through the site and building design and kind of respond to each of the reason for each of the requested variances, that would help the committee.
Sure. So Avery, I guess I'll start off by just kind of maybe talking through the site plan, and then if you want to jump in and talk through the variances that have been requested. But our prototype that we're looking to bring here to this particular community is our drive-through restaurant. It would be drive-through only, so we'll be servicing our customers through our dual lane drive-through layout, which we feel is very efficient layout that could really work here on this particular location. The location will have a couple of walk-up windows, so it is pedestrian friendly. So potential customers on foot will be able to walk up to our walk-up windows and place orders, and we have a couple of patio seats and tables out there for them. And then in general, again, I think this particular site right now has a drive-through use, and we feel like our particular design that we're bringing is definitely much more efficient, and will actually be able to service our future customers in a much better way. So Avery, did you want to talk through just some of the variances that we're pursuing?
I think actually with that, if I could just turn over to the committee members to comment on that. It looks like we're looking at an aerial, but yeah, and here's our landscape.
Here we go. Okay, yeah.
And we can get down to our site plan or this, whichever.
Can y'all walk us through how this double lane drive-through is going to work? Is it somebody walking out to deliver the food to a car?
So can you go back to the previous, I think it was slide 14. That shows there we go, this one. So when looking at the plan, again, this is our drive-through only layout. On at this particular, if you look there with the first two cars, the drive-through door / window is between the first set and second set of cars. And it is a sliding door. Our standard now is we have a sliding Tormax door that has the ability to function as a door as well as a window. And if you've been to any of our Chick-fil-A locations, you'll note that our team members actually walk out and they service approximately 2 to 3 cars at a time. With this new dual drive-through lane layout that we have here and that we've really been implementing since pre-COVID, we have the ability to service really 2 to 6 cars at a time. And so our team members will essentially walk out and deliver food at the delivery point. And then as well as when you go back to the order point canopy, where you'll see a little dotted square there back near the trash enclosure. We have a canopy there that covers approximately 4 to 6 cars. And so our team members are actually servicing and taking orders from at those cars at a time. And so it makes for a very, very efficient process to actually move cars on and off of our site. And then I'll also just add again, if you look at the front of the building, you see 3 tables. And kind of if you walk back at the front of the building there are 2 walk-up windows, 2 to 3 walk-up windows that will be able to where we'll be able to service pedestrians who may be walking and want to come and place an order.
So have we reached to the question and answer stage? Because I have lots of questions. I'm looking at you, Haley.
Does that conclude your presentation? And are there any other questions from the committee members? And then we can move to committee discussion. And if after the discussion, we can do the 5-minute recess.
Let me ask one quick question. I heard early on in the presentation that a drive-through prototype only was what I guess the development group decided was the best use of the site. Is that what determined that exactly? What I heard was drive-through prototype applicable to the site.
Yep. And when I use the word prototype, I use that, I'll say lightly. Again, we have what we call our freestanding restaurant prototype. And then we have a drive-through prototype, and then we kind of cater it and customize it towards to what works best for the site. And so when we looked at this particular site, looking at the size of the site, as well as the amount of customers that we forecast that we will be serving, we felt that the drive-through only was ideal here. Again, we didn't we didn't have enough room for, I guess, parking for customers to come in for our freestanding restaurant solution. And again, to have the ability to move customers on and off the site in a timely manner and in an orderly fashion, we felt that this site was primed and best solution for drive-through.
Okay, is there a market study associated with that in terms of how you come up with those decisions? And I mean, it just seems like it's going to be very profitable, but obviously there's other issues with the site that the committee members are going to bring up. Let me just leave it at that. I just was curious about the prototype.
Yeah, so I mean, when we just to answer that question, I want to answer your question. I mean, when we look at a site, there are certain ratios that we have to kind of determine whether or not it's a freestanding restaurant versus a drive-through only. Typically on our freestanding restaurants where we have a dine-in solution, we want approximately 60 some odd parking spaces, 60 to 70 parking spaces, and there's just no way we're going to get this on this particular site. So, you know,
Got
that,
it. Okay, so the parking is one thing. What other issues were brought up in that determination?
I mean, again, that was kind of the first one that's just,
The primary one.
yeah, that
Okay.
was, you know.
That's fair.
So, you say this has pedestrian, well, I understand that one of your variances is about not having a front door on the street on facing 2-lane avenue. This is just the 2-lane avenue address. I'm not really sure if you're not having internal service. I understand why you don't have a front door, but that's obviously a need for a variance for that. But what I don't see are pedestrian connections to 2-lane avenue. If you've got pedestrian walk up, then why aren't there pedestrian connections? I'm a little concerned, and not a little, a lot concerned about the stacking of cars. Chick-fil-A has proven to be an issue for Jefferson Parish, traffic-wise. And I'm curious as to the expectation of is South Carrollton going to become a de facto stacking area? And B, how are you going to control traffic where people are coming in from Carrollton and also coming in from 2-lane avenue? You've got 2 lanes of traffic, 2 means of ingress into your stacking area. Who's going to take precedence? And that's not a comment on y'all, but it's a comment on everybody knows that drivers, including myself, are not the best in Orleans Parish at sharing lane space. So I'm curious as to why this arrangement of not having more stacking space on site and just controlling access off of 2-lane avenue.
Sure, I can chime in on that. So when if you compare this, and I know you, the community there is familiar with our location on Veterans and some of the stacking and traffic issues there. And to speak to that, this particular layout and stacking count is significantly different. The current Veterans location does not have the dual lane stacking. And I mean, just to be real honest about it, it's a building that's almost 20 years old. And this new dual lane stacking allows us, before we even get outside of our drive-through throat, it allows up to 30 cars of stack, which, again, in comparison to a Veterans, once they reach 30 cars, they're already, they're already in the street. And so with this particular layout, we have an additional 15 to 16, have the ability to stack an additional 15 to 16 cars on our site before we would even get into, I'll just say, any of the streets, whether it's really 2-lane. And to speak to the Carrollton comment, one of the things we like to do is to give our operators flexibility, because again, there's peak hours, right, which we definitely understand during lunch and even some during dinner. And our operators are really great at being able to control traffic. And so we like to give them the flexibility to be able to possibly cone off certain entrances. And so we do think if it came to it, our operator would basically cone off the Carrollton entrance, so that traffic was basically only coming in off of 2-lane and stacking, which would basically allow almost up to 50 cars of stacking if we needed. Which, again, with this layout and with the efficiency that we have with our delivery service, we don't see us having that much stacking on our site.
Let me speak to that as well. So 2 lanes of traffic, of drive-through stacking. There's a point where you enter, and I see where you can have 30 cars basically being serviced. It's a bit of a security concern of mine, having those 30 cars without having any escape lanes on either side. When I first saw the site plan, I think that's the first thing that jumped at me. Just the fact that 30 cars can be literally landlocked within that double drive-through lane. Have you thought about that in terms of any concerns, security concerns, if something happened and there would be no way of escaping for someone who was maybe in the middle of that stack-up scenario?
Yes, but to just speak to that, I mean, this is a common layout. It's something that we have very common, kind of across the country. As I mentioned, we've been doing this for a couple of years now, and haven't had any security concerns. And if again, the whole thing around this particular layout and our design now is it truly gives the operator flexibility. So there may be times where he's not even using both lanes. Maybe times where there's just a single lane drive. But yeah, we haven't ran into an issue where that has been a security concern in general.
Miguel's point kind of brings up a second thing, a question about the drive-through. You're showing a curb between properties, but right now there's not a curb between Fontainebleau Storage and this property. And I'm curious as to why you would block that off.
So again, it's two separate uses, and the landowner basically didn't want to cross-pollinate traffic, and so that was kind of just a requirement of the deal.
And then on that, so it's kind of speaking to that, is the turn radius enough right there for that second? Again, knowing our drivers, it doesn't look like the turn radius coming out of the far right lane is going to be enough to be able to safely get from that end position to 2-lane avenue without some serious attention paid to how they're driving.
Yeah, so if you visited any of our restaurants, our stores, we have basically 10 members out there really delivering food and guiding traffic. So ultimately they wouldn't release 2 cars at a time.
I hear you saying that. You can assume that I've never been to a Chick-fil-A, so or not many drive-through restaurants, period. But what I can tell you is you're telling us stuff that assumes that this facility is going to be fully staffed at all times, that your traffic pattern relies on it being fully staffed, and that may or may not be the case because you're not going to be there to control it at all times. And so that's why I'm asking this question. It does not look like you have a safe turning radius to get out of that area. I just need you to check that because it doesn't look like that you've got parking right there. And if you have somebody who has an extra long truck that's parked in that parking space, there's the potential for a collision between driver 1 and driver 2. I mean, it's there. It doesn't matter if there's a staff person out there or not. So by design, you should be able to design it so that there is not that potential for collision. That's all I'm asking for, okay?
Follow the comment. Yep, we'll note that.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
I guess I was wondering why, was there something that prevented you from making it just go straight out? Why is there a turn?
So we are using the existing curb cuts that are there.
Which, Eleanor, that's a good question because that's my next question was, how is it that, since this is a new facility, how is it that an existing curb cut can be used at that width? Because that exceeds our current curb cut widths.
And I'll just answer that. It cannot. That would be another variance request.
Okay. And then
Todd, did you want to? Todd, I saw you had a comment. Did you want to speak to the radii question or comment?
Yeah, I just measured it. There are 15-foot radiuses. As you pull out the inner cars, 15 foot, it's 15 foot next to those three spaces with a 28-foot wide drive aisle across the front.
What about that outer car? What's the radius on that?
On which one?
I was trying to do the little mark on the screen, but oh, so it's 28. There's no, Joseph, do we not have the ability to sketch on these
Yeah.
anymore?
I'm looking at why that's not. Just a second.
Anyway.
As to the DOT comment, we're just trying to keep the existing curb cuts as they were to minimize the disturbance along Tulane and Carrollton.
No, I mean, I actually understand that part of it. I was just curious. I asked the question because I didn't understand that was one of the variances that you're looking for. So while we're kind of in that area, if you're not having in-store service, then why are there so many parking spaces? Is this employee parking only?
I'll jump in. This is Avery. They have an arrangement for off-site employee parking, but that would service anybody that wanted to come use the walk-up windows and/or third-party delivery systems.
Okay. And then, so with the walk-up windows, where's the ability to walk up from Tulane?
Yeah, so Todd, you might have some more notes on this because I know we added the pedestrian lanes at some point. I believe the worry was having folks crossing over the drive aisle, all the exiting that we were just discussing, and then, having folks cross over. So the pedestrian access point on Carrollton, is one solution. I can see the concern, though, to add one off of Tulane as well. I think we're just going to have to hit the drawing board on that again.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think the thought, oh, go ahead, Todd.
The long pedestrian access over to Carrollton, they could walk down Tulane, walk down Carrollton and come over. That was orientated right at the bus stop there.
that's not going to happen. They're going to cut down, they're going to walk through the parking lot or walk through the driveway. So y'all need to take care of that because that's one of the issues for Tulane Avenue is that it's pedestrian oriented and you're not pedestrian oriented to Tulane Avenue. You're pedestrian oriented to the bus stop, which is great. I'm going to give you kudos for that part of it, but you've got to just pedestrian walking across 3 travel lanes. Why aren't you providing like a pedestrian refuge as part of that end cap on that island, and then having a designated walking path across there with some change in paving and make it safer for pedestrians? Because think about pedestrians first, and then worry about the people who are parking on site for a non-eat-in restaurant second. So I think you need to change the perspective of that because this is very car oriented. It just has nothing to do with pedestrians. This is like pedestrians go away.
So was this applicant involved in the Chick-fil-A that went on the West Bank?
Yes.
Can the applicant remind me if that one was drive-through only or the standard eat-in service as well?
That one has in-store seating.
Right. And so I find that interesting, right? Because I think one thing I'm negotiating in my commentary is that this is an intersection that is very car dominated. It is very unfriendly to pedestrians already, right? And so I think I've kind of like, okay, drive-through restaurant like makes sense here, right? What doesn't make sense is kind of what the other committee members are saying is the complete disregard for pedestrians and kind of interior seating. And so can the applicant also remind me how many parking spaces that West Bank location had?
I do not have that offhand. I certainly hear you on the pedestrian thing. I think that our marching orders are to go revisit that and incorporate some of these ideas and maybe some others. But I think just in terms of site differences, this between DeGaulle really was kind of an open palette. It's on a very large site. And as you'll remember, we're actually demoing another older building to make way for the Chick-fil-A site. So there's really kind of a blank canvas more so. Here it's a landlocked piece. And so there really just was not an option to have in-store dining. There just isn't enough space for the parking, and that just kind of is what it is. But I do hear you about the pedestrian piece, and I think that Patrick, Todd, and I will hit the drawing board on that.
Well, I guess to push back and continue my commentary, considering the fact that the entire site is being renovated, it sounds like you can also start with a blank slate, right? And if we were keeping the whole building there, that would be a whole separate discussion. But I think, particularly as someone who rides transit and bike, as Danny said, kudos for the kind of transit access and pedestrian walkway through the site, which of course can be better. But having an entire, basically highway fronting you as you're waiting for the bus, and what three paths of driveways and vehiculars behind you, I mean, that's fairly alienating, right? And I think, I think about the restaurant that was literally across the street, Tulane Namise, that is no longer there, and obviously a different site, same corner condition, and they, fronted, they were more oriented and had, outdoor seating, which you do as well here. But just the sheer amount of variances for basically a new construction is fairly audacious, to put it neutrally, and I'm just very confused that a more suburban location like General de Gaulle has indoor seating and meets much more of the building design requirements, but this one, which has a lot more transit users, bike users, pedestrian users, didn't really want to incorporate that, and that's fairly confusing. Because if we're thinking about the other models of Chick-fil-A, that's fine, but we're also in the city of New Orleans, and since permissions are being asked of us, I think it makes sense to kind of treat our city with a finer grain, or what is it, finer point brush, if you will. And I'm just not seeing that.
Yeah, so now that I can annotate, I wanted to go back to something, and now that Lewis is here, having that car coming out, if you've got this second car and it's coming out here, they've got to be a really decent driver, and you're counting on somebody else being a decent driver for not hitting any of these vehicles in this area here. I mean, that's assuming that those are, those vehicles fit in that parking space and they don't have something on the back, or they're not an extra long truck, or that is a big concern for me. So, and then the other thing is these areas which are here and here, which are currently paved, Parkways is going to want you to restore those to a parkway planter area, because you're missing a lot of street trees along both sides. And I do encourage you to talk to, this is my last comment, I do encourage you to talk to your landscape architect, because the plant selection is not necessarily appropriate for New Orleans climate. It's probably more appropriate to North Shore or Baton Rouge. Some of it's fine. There's some of the shrubs are, they don't tolerate our climate very well.
I have a few comments. One, the parking. There's 19 proposed parking spaces and only 5 are required. And I think we've already commented that since this is a drive-through only, it seems that the parking is not a reasonable request. Especially it was mentioned that the employees were going to be parking off-site. And this is, and I'll go through the overlay standards in a second, but we're really trying to comment that this is a pedestrian oriented area. So having all of these additional parking spaces between the building and the street really gives it a auto-oriented focus. So I'm wondering if there was any consideration to pulling the building to the corner of South Carrollton and Tulane Avenue. And so just to kind of go through the overlay standards, and kind of to give some context to what Joseph mentioned about the Chick-fil-A on General de Gaulle. I worked on the conditional use report for the Chick-fil-A near the Superdome on Loyola Avenue. And the reason that you're going through a conditional use request is to see if a fast food restaurant is appropriate for this specific site. So this specific site is in a historic urban corridor use restriction overlay district. And that's putting additional standards on additional review criteria on fast food restaurants. So when certain uses are permitted in the base zoning district, which this one is, they also need conditional use approval to make sure that they're appropriate for the site. And that would be a bar, a car wash, a fast food restaurant, a gas station, and such. So what we looked at when we were considering the appropriateness of the Chick-fil-A near the Superdome was that it fit within the context of the area. And we said this sort of fast food restaurant was appropriate because there was no parking. It was walk-up windows, and it fit within the pattern of development of the nearby restaurants in the area. So when we're looking at this, that's the type of variances you're requesting. This seems like your standard protocol Chick-fil-A, but you're in an area it's in an EC enhancement corridor design overlay district. And so that's getting into the next overlay standards. And so those additional design review approval standards, they're stating the requirements that we're talking about. Development shall promote safe, convenient, and attractive pedestrian and bicycle access. The second one is compact neighborhood centers shall be created at major intersections to the extent possible in order to support transit. So you are at a very major intersection at Carrollton and Tulane. So there's design changes that can be made. You can pull the building up to the corner. You can make sure that the pedestrians approaching the building wouldn't have to conflict with the vehicular oncoming traffic. So just to point those two additional overlay things, but within there's a third section in the CZO, which is the building design standards for the MU3 district. And that's saying that the primary entrances shall be oriented to the street or the corner. And also, as I mentioned before, that you would have to have transparency at the primary street. So that kind of the goal for that is that pedestrians walking by would be able to see in. And I know we talked about the prototype that you're talking about, but be drawn to come in. And I know you're just proposing drive-through with walk-up windows, but this really isn't fitting the site very well, but I do believe that there are design changes that you could make. And I think the first thing would be a reduction in the parking and pulling the building more to the corner.
I just want to follow up with what Haley said. From an architectural sense, just having the setback of that building all the way deep into the site, I mean, it's literally a drive-through with a supporting building component, and it's not appropriate for such an important corner in the city. If you were able to shift the building at a minimum west, so it's closer to the intersection, I think it would make a lot more sense architecturally in terms of how the building sits on the site. I would agree that that's something that should be looked into. I would even go far as saying if the building could shift west, maybe there's a possibility to have the parking between the drive-through lanes and the building. And then that would require maybe a little bit more of a remote scenario with servicing the drive-through by the staff in the building, obviously, but it could also allow for a pedestrian-friendly patio in the front where it kind of is oriented towards two-lane, and maybe it makes sense in developing a prototype that is more appropriate for this location.
So we made a lot of commentary, and I think, you know, our recommendations will be based on the applicant's willingness to kind of incorporate those. And so I would like to ask the applicant, how willing are you to, how willing and how feasible is it to make these changes according to the approval criteria we rely on?
Thank you all for the comments, and I think, you know, some of the things that you all have outlined. You know, we will take it into consideration, look at it. I know we have looked at a lot of it previously. Being fully transparent, you know, when you talk about feasibility of really shifting the building to the west or towards the intersection, it really creates more issues that I think are going to be a larger concern for you all as it relates to just traffic, and in full transparency, it makes it really tough for any DTO, for any restaurant with a drive-through to work. Just when you look at the amount of traffic that's coming off of you know, from Carrollton and or from two-lane. But again, you know, being respectful, we will look at it. We'll take into consideration and see what we can do. But as I mentioned, just from a feasibility standpoint, you know, it's tough, but we'll look at it.
One thing I'll additionally say is that we're sympathetic to people that come through our committee, but one thing we really rely on is plans and diagrams that speak to the arguments that are being made. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know which way this what motion will happen today, if this is deferred or not. But one thing I will say is that you know, traffic plans are very helpful for us, traffic plans and diagrams, as well as other schematic designs of, you know, alternate building locations, parking situations, and then, you know, the architect or designer kind of explaining why those don't work, because that gives us a much more informed opinion. And, you know, obviously time and, you know, design is hard, but that really helps our committee so that everyone can get to a resolution that is satisfactory. So I would keep that in mind, either when this goes to the commission or if this comes back to us. Those additional documents would go a long way for backing up your arguments, because frankly, I'm not seeing that right now.
Can we just take a quick look at the elevations? If the site plan is to stay as it is, I'd just like to take a swipe at the elevations. I think part of I mean, obviously it's a very car-oriented development. I get that, but my concern is the very defensive looking building, the lack of window openings, you know, the window to wall ratio is very low. And, you know, I appreciate having the seating out front. I think an addition of a door to the front would be helpful to help give it some presence on Tulane Avenue, and larger windows at the very least on the South Carrollton Avenue elevation. At this point, it just looks very fortress-like, and I understand that you aren't going to have people coming into a restaurant, but that doesn't mean the building needs to look like a cell. So,
Understand? And so we do have some glazing on all elevations. Although, I mean, it's not, you know, for pedestrian use. We do have some doors on the Carrollton exterior elevation. And then when you look at the front elevation, that's facing 2-lane, you know, there's glazing there for the, you know, for the walk-up windows. And I don't know if you can see that really well. It's not showing that well on my screen, but point taken.
I do see it, it's just not enough.
Okay.
And then my other comment was, I find it awkward that the canopy that shades the cars comes forward towards 2-lane avenue of the, you know, main white sort of block pavilion. I don't understand why it's doing that, and it's very odd architecturally. So if you could just scoot that so it's even with the plane of that front wall, I think it would be a lot more successful architecturally.
Okay, and just to explain why we have that condition, it is for I guess just protection for our team members who, as you know, as I mentioned earlier, will be you know, walking out and servicing customers. You know, they will essentially pull a car up to service, what we call kind of downstream, as well as, you know, they'll be servicing cars upstream, anywhere from, as I mentioned earlier, 1 to 6 or so cars. So that's why that is there.
I understand why you have the canopy. I just don't understand why it sits maybe 4 inches proud of the front wall of the building. And I don't think you'll lose a lot of operational capacity by making it even. It either needs to be even with that wall plane or come further out. But the fact that it's just sitting 4 inches in front of it is just very weird.
Patrick, I think Eleanor is referencing the pedestrian one at the bottom left of the screen.
No.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
Then the top right image, do you see how the car cover?
Yeah.
In front of the white building at the front.
Yeah. So understood. We'll take a look at that. Yeah, the one on is the one for pedestrian. Obviously, is for whether it's rain and or sun cover for walk-up customers. But as I mentioned earlier, the one at the drive-through is for team members who will be walking down to service cars that they'll pull down. But we will take a look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Patrick, I think the main reason it comes forward some is just for rain protection for that door and the column that supports the canopy. We don't want it to be sticking out into the drive-through lane where it could get hit by a vehicle.
Absolutely.
It seems like that could be tweaked.
Yeah, aren't the columns, so your site plan shows the columns in between lanes of traffic,
They have both.
but your image doesn't show that. Or am I missing something in that image right there? The top right image, it shows it as a single span canopy with columns on either side.
So as we work through the design, our goal is to have it along the I'll say the columns on the outside of the canopy. That doesn't always work due to setback or easements, and or just kind of what the property line. And so we're still working through those details. If we can't make it work with the property line, then we will drop the columns along the center and have protection for those.
Just to add to the discussion, you know, we're looking at these components as design elements. So, you know, these canopies could be a significant design element that contributes to the overall building. So, you know, we're kind of picking apart a little bit, but there needs to be an overall logic. So if we can kind of take a broader view of these comments, I mean, these things could express something in the design of the building. I mean, we are looking for some design intent that is that is part of this review.
Can't the auto canopy and the pedestrian walk-up canopy, can't they be joined together?
They could be joined together, for example. That's kind of what I'm
Yeah.
getting. I mean, we're looking at this as a building that has elements that need coherence. So that's a suggestion.
And then you wouldn't have to rely, if they came out over that seating area, then you wouldn't have to rely on umbrellas that may or may not blow away.
Exactly. You know, these are things that if we could kind of get a little bit more into something that makes more sense in this site, all of these elements could, you know, they could be wonderful. You know, I think we want to support the endeavor, but what is presented is not necessarily appropriate.
Okay, I will say just on the umbrella comment, I mean, that is kind of a part of our brand, if you will. Our, you know, our umbrellas out front is kind of a call to just let our customers know that they are welcome to kind of come and dine. So we, you know, when we have a patio, we absolutely kind of want to keep those.
Okay, so having said that, move the building over and create a bigger patio. So how about we're giving you stuff to work with here. Take it.
Well, and it might free up a little bit of area to make a little bit more friendly patio. I mean, it seems kind of harsh and concrete paved everywhere.
Patio. Sorry,
Yeah.
Dave, talking over you.
That's all right. It's a lot of hardscape around that planting. I mean, that patio area with no planting. Even vines growing on the fence would help, you know, soften that area somewhat. So, but I'm really conflicted about this having it be a drive up only and really no pedestrian considerations other than a nod towards the bus stop location. It really concerns me based on the comments and the projects that we're looking at 2-lane corridor. I know y'all are looking at it as a site. We look at 2-lane corridor as a whole corridor. We already have issues with DOTD. I mean, we fight with them about trees and everything. But that's one of our main corridors into the city and into downtown. And this is a main intersection. And you didn't even provide a site plan that has street trees on it, but you are asking for all these variances. And I don't understand that logic. And I know y'all know been through this process and you know what we're going to ask for because this is an enhancement corridor and you know it's in an enhancement corridor. So where are the enhancements? And I would say this, even though I'm not thrilled with your brand, I would say this for anybody who brings this site plan in. It's a new model for us, you know, having a double drive lane, but not having any of these considerations is a real concern.
I feel like at this point, we've given them a lot of comments and feedback, and I'm not sure what the desire of the staff is in terms of timing of meetings, but I would like to make a motion to defer and request that they revise based on our comments.
We have to have a 5-minute recess first.
Okay.
Yes, if that concludes the comments and the discussion, we can move to the 5-minute recess. But I would just like to say that I believe without deferring it, that we can just make a motion with provisos that state what we're looking for. And then the staff can work with the applicant, and we will be happy to work with you to get those changes made. Just mentioning that. So at this time, this concludes the presentation of dockets. The committee will now recess for 5 minutes and resume at 11:03.
Thank you.
The digital public comment form is now closed. We will begin with the consideration of dockets, including the public comment portion of the meeting. Joseph, have we received any public comments?
We did not.
Okay. At this time, would the committee like to make a motion regarding zoning docket 5721?
Before we make a motion, can I suggest that everybody have their, if they don't already, but if you have provisos, to type them in and put them in the comment column or in the chat box so that we can make sure that everybody's are covered. Otherwise, it's a very long motion. So can we take a couple minutes to write out our list of items for the proviso?
Couldn't we just say, based on the recommendations of the DAC, and the staff summarizes what those are from their notes?
Can we send them to the staff then?
Yeah, we could send them to the staff, but I guess we haven't made a motion yet, so we don't know which way it's going to go. But that is very proactive, yes.
Well, I'm making a motion to, I'm having a hard time making a motion to approve subject to these provisos without knowing what these provisos are. Otherwise, my motion is to defer until these provisos can be met, and then let's talk about what the provisos are. So how do y'all want to move forward with this? That's why, for me, we had a lot of commentary from a lot of people, and I think we need to write out, make sure these are written out so that the applicant and DAC and staff all know we're all on the same page.
Correct. Yeah, I think that's sensible, Danny. I would have actually made a motion to deny, but Haley, as it relates to the, because this is scheduled for the 2nd July meeting, is that correct?
I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. Just because
mentioned that it, I'm not sure when Stephen's going to schedule it.
okay, just because that will determine, since we have moved DACs to once a month, you know, when we have our next meeting and when we could get the minutes obviously determines if it gets into the report or not. And so that's the only consideration.
It needed to be reviewed today so that it could make its way into the report.
Well, I'm happy to make a motion to deny and ask that they resubmit with revised plans that reflect the recommendations and feedback of the DAC.
I'm happy to second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion by HDLC for denial and a second by CPC.
I have a question.
I'm sorry, what's that, Danny?
I have a question as part of the discussion of that. So does this mean that it's still going to go to the planning commission, and
Yes.
it doesn't matter what DAC says anyway, because it's going to be what the planning commission decides, correct?
Your recommendations and the comments, the summary of this meeting will be provided to Bob, and it will go into his recommendation to the city planning commission and the city council.
Okay. So it would still be helpful to have that list of provisos that we want to
Absolutely.
see. Right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Discussion bullet points, yes. So do you want to discuss that before moving forward with the motion of denial, or can we handle that after?
Well,
Handle it now.
Usually when we do this in our architectural review committee, you know, we leave it to the staff to summarize the comments, and I have faith in the staff that they've taken notes and are able to summarize, you know, the comments that were made. I think that's typically how we've done it.
Yeah, I think between Haley and I, we did take notes, and I feel like if that's how we want to proceed, the committee should feel comfortable that we will encapsulate all that we've discussed.
Okay, so we have a motion by HLC for denial based on the comments and a second by city planning. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Haley Dellery, yay. Joseph Cologne,
Yeah.
Danny McElmurray,
Yay.
Eleanor Burke,
Yay.
McGilvatary,
Yay.
Lewis, Haywood,
Had to go to a meeting.
absent. Lindsay, Lex.
Yay.
Okay, and the motion passes. Zoning docket 5721 has been recommended for denial. This concludes the June meeting. I'll see you all again in July. Thank you for a thoughtful discussion.
Thank you all.
Bye.